Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are across the globe. I'd like to welcome you to this great session this afternoon. Well, from where I am, it's actually 1 p.m. in Nigeria. We would kindly let us allow for about a minute or so, a minute or 2 minutes to allow people come in and get settled into this very, very important conversation today. We feel that because of the importance of this very, very impactful session, we should allow a couple of minutes to get people onto the webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you, George. So we'd like to get straight into it. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to today's great conversations with great leaders. It's a 1-hour webinar where we bring in senior leaders from great workplaces across Africa. Today we are having the great conversations with great leaders from leaders across in Kenya to be able to speak to a very, very important topic, organizational preparedness in the advent of AI. Artificial intelligence is no longer something we discuss as a distant possibility. It is here with us. It's impacting our leadership, it's impacting industries, it's shaping organizations, it's enabling us to rethink the way we see work. And so the question is no longer if AI would impact our workplaces, but rather how ready we are to lead through it. At Great Place to Work, we believe that technology can never replace the power of people. It can only amplify it, which is why today's conversation is so, so critical. And so we'll be looking at not only around technology, but around strategy, around culture, around ethical practices, around the different human dimensions that can get us properly prepared to fully embrace AI. I have today on this call a very, very, very important leader within the community, AI community. I have with me today our guest, Rahul Sravastava. He is the managing partner for TechnoBrain Kenya. Um, TechnoBrain Kenya is one of our great workplaces in Kenya. And so this session affords us the opportunity not just to only know about how his organization is preparing or is prepared to fully embrace AI, but also to show us ways as great workplaces, his organization is leading that charge to fully embody and have great impacts on AI or have great impacts on AI for his business. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome Raul. Raul, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great, Otmari. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that warm welcome. A quick correction, managing director, not a managing partner.
Okay,
But it's a pleasure to be here. And most importantly, it's a pleasure to be at Great Places to Work. So thank you for having me.
excellent. And so how's the end, weather at your end this morning? I know you're out in the US as we speak.
That's
Um,
right. I'm based in Seattle. The weather actually right now is lovely. I think it's 22 degrees. It's very pleasant. But the sun's not out yet. So we'll see how the day progresses.
Excellent. Raul, I hear it's around 5 a.m. thereabout in the US as we speak. So thanks
That's
for
right.
taking out time for being part of
Absolutely. It's an
this.
important conversation.
Excellent. And so this is a 1 hour session. And so it's going to be in different segments. So we would start with some introduction. Raul would provide an introduction about who he is and about his business. We would go right into the questions. And so kindly around the 30-minute mark, we would throw up the lines for questions from the audience. So if you have your questions as Raul begins to speak on this very important topic, kindly put it down so when we open up the lines for questions, you have yours ready to go. So, Raul, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure thing. So name is Rahul Srivatsa. I'm the managing director for Technobrain GBS, which is Global Business Services. Been with Technobrain for a bit over 5 years now, since about 2020. So my career has taken all sorts of swings and turns. I'm actually an economist by education. Early part of my education was in economics, finance, business, statistics, and the likes. The early part of my career was as a data scientist. I worked at a startup, also in Kenya, blockchain-based startup. Did a bit of chief of staff work. I think that was a really important part of my career, the ability to dabble in various important functions as chief of staff. You're sort of secondary to the CEO, getting to interact with leadership and getting mentored by leadership. So that has what has stayed with me for quite a long time, and that is something I hope to impart as well. So that's been a bit of my trajectory. Moved into leadership about a couple of years ago, and looking forward to where I can take Technobrain as an organization.
Thank you very much. And so maybe a bit about Technobrain, so that our audience can get a perspective around what you do and how it has all transpired to date.
Absolutely. I like to call Technobrain as a 27-year-old startup. We've been around the block. We've been around for quite some time, but we still very much have this startup mentality and culture. So if you want to boil it down, we're pretty much an IT, BPO, and consultancy organization. But our roots and our expertise are in various different fields. So we started way back out in 1997, actually in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. That's where Technobrain as a company was founded. And for the first sort of 5+ years of our DNA, we were an IT training company. So we trained a lot of the government employees and folks in Kenya, Tanzania, and generally in sub-Saharan Africa in various different IT skills. And through the course of that journey, we realized we were creating all of these IT skills, but there wasn't enough of an avenue in terms of employment. Most of the guys who were getting trained ended up going back and working for the government. So we identified that really the big buyer and the big demand for services is going to be the government in the coming years. So we decided to embark on this journey to service the public sector, build a lot of our own IP. So over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, we built more than 10 different IP products of our own. So this is within the realm of public finance management, integrated financial management systems, identity management, and then eventually tax and customs. Our TRIP solution is in the Gartner quadrant, alongside some of the bigger players. So that just demonstrates the depth and scope of Technobrain's capabilities. And towards about the mid 2010s is when the GBS side of things come. We understood that Kenya, like India and like other places in the world, is sort of very firmly situated for outsourcing. Abundance of talent pool, very educated talent pool, and more conducive to the Western speaking world, because Kenyan's English, I would say, is about as good as it gets. Right. So that's when we embarked on this outsourcing journey as well. We set up a greater presence in the US. I think a pivotal moment for us was to bring in the Microsoft Testing Center in 2019. Starting very small, about 20 different manual testers. And I think as of today, we're about at 180 different engineers doing everything from manual testing, test automation, software development, data analytics, dashboard building, and everything in between. So we've really increased the scope of work we've been doing in the past few years, and we hope to keep climbing up the value chain in terms of the services we offer.
Excellent. So I heard you said you started out in Tanzania. So what caused the move from Tanzania to Kenya?
That's a bit of a tricky question, but to put it plainly, I think Nairobi is the most conducive to business, and especially multinational business. So the business environment was just friendlier in Nairobi, and I think the availability of talent was also exponentially that much larger in a place like Nairobi. So we decided to move our headquarters. I don't know the exact date, but I think sometime around 2012, 2010 is when we decided to make that change happen.
Excellent. And so being managing director now at Technobrain, what would you say is the most important function? Is it technology? Is it people management? Is it what would you say would be your most important function as managing director? Or is it sales?
I'm a firm believer that people can manage themselves, especially given the incentives and autonomy to do so. So we have a very good leadership team, and our engineers, our project managers, our operations managers are extremely capable and directly converse with our end customers. So in terms of vision, it really is to empower the next generation of Kenyans, specifically in niche technologies like engineering services, as well as specific BPO services as well. So that's really my vision, and it's a bit twofold, right? It also involves building new technologies and innovations. I don't think an organization can survive for long without adopting new technologies, and in this instance, we're all talking about AI. So that's something also that I'm embarking on. I have a couple of really important people in my organization that are leading an incubator, and we're trying to come up with new services that we can offer. Obviously, we want to start regionally with some of these services, but really the idea is if these services are as good as we claim it's going to be, it's something that the world can consume. So that's really where my motivations are as managing director, and not to mention growth.
Thank you. So in terms of your journey, you were certified as a great place to work in 2024. As we speak, you're already in the process of recertification in 2025. And so what's the motivation around this?
I think, it is a signal, right? It is a signal to ourselves that we are maintaining our standards as a great place to work. Obviously, the title gives us the credibility to do so. So internally, it gives us a lot of confidence that our policies are good and out there. And then on the other side, on the demand side of things, companies want to know that they're working with somebody who cares about their employees, right? Company wants to know that we take care of our employees, and it's not going to affect business in any way. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to how effective an operation is, right? So if people are leaving, if people are not satisfied at work, it is going to have an impact in their operations. So I think us getting Great Places to Work certified is a true signal to the fact that we care about this, and we're going to continue caring about this.
Thank you very much. We have a few testimonies around companies that say to us that their badge attracted their suppliers to do more business with them because they felt that if you have good people practices and policies, you're likely to have some good levels of sustainability in this industry that is rather very competitive.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So let's go into the areas around this big picture. AI we see as a big picture. And so when you think about artificial intelligence in the workspace, what excites you the most and probably what concerns you also to the most?
I think what excites me the most is we're still at the cusp of discovering what we can do with this technology. I think we are sort of fitting a square peg in a round hole, if you will, where we have this new technology that is quite incredible, albeit not perfect, many flaws and a long way for it to go. But we're trying to fit it into the realm of what we already understand and know in terms of business and technology and solutions. So I'm excited to see how this evolves, how we're going to come up with new solutions to try to plug in. And part of that means empowering our people to start thinking of ideas, allowing them to do research, enabling them to leverage what this technology has to offer. So that's really exciting for me. And personally, when it comes to TechnoBrain, of course, in the grander scheme of things, artificial intelligence has many implications. And I'll leave the smarter people to talk about that. But what concerns me is we're going to take it as at surface value. We're not going to dig deeper into what AI is guiding us to do. And I think that would be a bit of a risky move because it's still not a mature technology. It's a technology that is maturing. So if you take it at face value, then do so at your own peril. Yeah, that I would say.
So would that form part of, okay, sorry about that. Would that form part of what would be some worry for you, or are there other things that could be worrisome around AI for you?
It is a worry, but it's not a specific worry. It's a general worry. I have many specific worries, when it comes to AI use, hallucinations for starters, but also on the behavioral side of things. I think something like a availability of a chat GPT is something that expounds a person's character. So if someone is curious, if someone is inquisitive, if someone is hardworking, they're going to leverage this to the best of their ability. But if someone is trying to take a seat back and, with bare minimum effort, trying to output something that, gets an okay at the end of the day, then I think it has a danger of creating a lot of lazy people who will enjoy and bask in their laziness. And that's not going to yield much productivity. So in terms of behavioral aspects of AI, that is something I am concerned about.
And so does it begin to affect human creativity? Because you talked about some people being lazy because AI has come in. So does that begin to affect our creativity because it's an easier way to just get things going?
I think it affects it positively and negatively. So, I mean, think of the interface that you are interacting with, right? You have a prompt that you have to give this to get something valuable, right? So someone can spend quite a bit of time understanding how prompt engineering works, understanding the tone of the question, the specificity of the question, the criteria of the question, the constraints of the question. So you can actually put in a lot of time to engineer this prompt so that you get the best out of this LLM. And also you take the time and effort to cross-validate the information that's being received, right? Now, on the other end of the spectrum is me uploading a little bit of information and saying, make it better, right? So there's two ends of the spectrum to what you can do with AI. It will make it better and it will give you generic information on what you want to hear, but it's really not going to add much value to the general ecosystem or society.
Excellent. And so leading to the question around how prepared TechnoBrain is with AI, how ready are you?
I think it's a loaded question. I think in many ways we're quite ready. In many ways we're just getting started. So in terms of offering our own products, we're just getting started. I think it takes some time to build some of our own products. So there's 2 or 3 products, as I mentioned earlier, with the incubator that we're trying to get their MVP out in the last quarter of this year. But where we're already good at is consumption of AI. Right. So we already have engineers vibe coding. We already have marketing using AI to generate content and collateral that we can then leverage on our platforms. We use AI extensively for research, but that is the extent of what we use AI for. Internally, in a lot of our services, we do a lot of automation using AI, especially things like LangChain and understanding feedback. For example, that's something that we have a lot of expertise in. And we're trying to leverage, we have about 5 years of experience in the testing ecosystem, right? So we're trying to see how we can leverage LLMs and things like Power Automate to build a more comprehensive quality assurance testing module. It's part of what's going to be coming in the next quarter. So in that sense, I think we're consuming AI very effectively. There's going to be a learning curve. I think a lot of folks are still understanding the best ways to use AI. So we have engineers who have a preference for cloud versus GitHub versus Copilot. So people are figuring out, what is best for their function. I think there is a consensus that cloud right now is the best for vibe coding, but I'll let my engineers confirm on that.
Excellent. So in terms of business strategy and how you adopt it to be able to how AI is aligned to your business strategy, and also in terms of how you are able to measure business outcomes, does AI currently have a place at Technobrain?
Without a doubt, I think if you can't demonstrate measurable outcomes, that's what we call a fad, right? You're hoping for something to happen eventually down the line. So, I mean, the way we measure it is how fast does it take for our engineers to ship a product before and after AI? Is there an increase in shipping time? Or is there a decrease in shipping time? Is there an increase in efficiency? These are very measurable outcomes, right? So when we're able to complete a test pass in 5 days versus 8 days, that's a measurable outcome. So in these specific cases, we're able to definitely measure it. There's more ambiguous parts of AI, like how we leverage research, for example. That's a bit harder to measure, but it enables and informs our decision-making that much more. So we're able to take quicker decisions. It's a trickier thing to measure, but I think we can sense that we're able to move faster because of the quickness of our ability to get research done, if you will.
Thank you. There's this ongoing discussions, concerns around AI will take jobs, would take. There's so much uncertainty around what work looks like, who's going to be employed when AI becomes fully integrated, and all of that stuff. How do you address those concerns while maintaining trust within the organization?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer because I think the entire industry is in a bit of a flux right now, and it's moving at the speed of light. So it's tough to say one way or the other. I would like to say that for sure there will be a loss of employment going forward as this technology matures, right? The scale and the prevalence of it is to be determined. I mean, we can use data to understand where we're at, right? So a company like Meta and Microsoft and a lot of these Indian BPOs, for example, laying off thousands of people. Maybe it has to do with the business environment at large, but I think it also has a lot to do with automation. I mean, you have the CEO of Salesforce saying 30 to 50% of the work is currently being done by software engineers. I mean, I'm sure you can be skeptical about his claims, but if not 30%, maybe 10%, right? And that's still a huge improvement in terms of the contributions of AI and increasing efficiencies. So I think it will have an impact. Whether we get to artificial general intelligence, AGI, that is up to debate. And if we look at the news, especially in the last week or so, people have tempered their language quite significantly in terms of when AGI is coming, right? Especially with ChatGPT 5 coming in, it's not as good as everybody expected. People are concerned. But I don't think it's outlandish for us to experience plateaus in this technology. There will be plateaus, but the general trajectory is upwards. And I think if you look at the time horizon, in just about 3 years since ChatGPT came out, or 4 years since ChatGPT came out, the industry has changed quite dramatically, right? And I think it's going to continue to do so, and it's going to be dangerous to be short-sighted in this regard.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I think I was lost for a bit. And so is it possible that we are, maybe industry leaders are beginning to use AI to begin to proactively determine job roles that might not be relevant in future, so that it enables companies to begin to engage employees to reskill, upskill, and all of that, so that we don't lose so much. So people begin to relearn and learn new ways based on data that AI provides for us to say, these are some of those jobs that would probably be relevant in future. These are some of those jobs that are likely to go off the market, off the scale after AI is fully integrated.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't recall who it was. It might have been Anthropic or Microsoft, but they released a report that basically outlined the impact on employment that they thought this technology was going to have. And it's a list of about 200 different jobs and the various degrees at which these jobs are going to be impacted. So I can share this with you after the call, but I think it's pretty illuminating to go through this list, because the leaders in these industries should have a wake-up call, basically looking at this list, right? If they are a leader within this industry, what are they going to do when the time comes? If the time comes, but more when the time comes.
Yes, I really would love to see that report. That'll be
Yeah.
very, very helpful for us for what we do. And so it brings to mind the areas around culture. There's this saying, general notion, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so culture can play a key role in whether AI is embraced or resisted. And so how are you able to have that conversation to ensure that culture doesn't begin to frustrate something that is good for Technobrain?
Culture is pivotal. I completely agree with you, Otomari. And I think that is something that I'm most extremely proud of with our team, particularly the engineering team. I think they have fostered a culture for learning. They are extremely eager to get their hands on as new technology as possible. They're the ones who prompted leadership saying, hey, we need access to cloud. We need access to ChatGPT. Even if it's a month trial or a 2-month trial, allow us to play around with this and see if it yields any results in our efficiencies, right? And it does. So I'm happy that we have created this culture and inculcated this desire to create new things. And that's also to do with the hackathons we conduct and the fact that we've created a restricted space in Technobrain Incubator. It is a space where people can come and think and create new products without thinking about the repercussions of long term and this and that. Obviously, at some point, we'll have to make a business decision on the viability of a product or not. But the fact that they have a safe space to come and brainstorm, they have hackathons to come and showcase their own ideas that can eventually be picked up and packaged into a business solution is a huge opportunity for these guys. So the incentives are there and they're taking it, right? So these guys are phenomenal. They're the ones who are coming and telling us about the new technologies. So innovation is happening top down and bottom up. It's not one direction whatsoever.
Thank you very much. We are at the bottom of the hour now. If there are any questions for Rahul at this time, it'd be nice to share those questions. I think, George, we have a device that can allow you to mute people so that they can ask the questions, or we just get them in the Q&A chat room. Are there any questions thus far with what Rahul has talked about? Might be of interest to your organization?
Are they going to type the questions or?
I think you can type the questions, or I think George can also allow people to raise their hands up, and we can get them to basically ask the questions by themselves. Are there any questions? even as we speak, even as we are with possible questions, there's always the area around ethics and governance considerations for all of what we do in AI. And so, how does the organization approach ethical AI use and data privacy and all of those linkages?
That's a good and a tough question. I think for
Mm.
starters, it's very explicitly told that you can't have PII data on any of these platforms, nor nor can you have company confidential information on this. So barring that, you can leverage this to the extent that you can. Of course, there are workarounds to this, using AI in secure environments, using AI only with organizations that have the certifications, the compliance requirements in place. Um, I am a bit of a skeptic, even when they say they have these requirements in place, but I think that's the best you can hope for right now. In terms of ethical AI, I think that's a tougher question to answer, and this is really what I believe the folks building the large language models themselves are largely concerned about. Um, so are there inherent biases that we're imparting into LLMs? Are there inherent um, you know negative aspects of human society, in other words, just biases, that is so entrenched in LLM that it's going to be hard to get rid of it in the long term. So I'm afraid I don't know much about ethical AI in terms of what these companies are approaching, but I know that is at their forefront as well. So it will be interesting to see how these companies evolve, because it's a bit of a trickle down thing, right? So once ChatGPT releases an LLM or Cloud or whoever that is, we're the consumers. So we have to hope that that LLM and their infrastructure and their software is compliant and secure, right? And now there's also an industry emerging for security. I have a friend who has a startup, and his entire focus is on governance and security for AI in enterprise organizations. So that's definitely going to be a market as well going forward. And I think the biggest concern for me is you don't exactly know how folks are using AI or ChatGPT in whatever you want to call it, right? So there's no comprehensive monitoring tool of what someone is using this for. So if someone is leaking critical information, that is a concern, and there's no exact way to find out if that is happening or not. So it's more a matter of trust and education and learning that we're embarking on to make sure that doesn't happen. But downstream, it's hard for us to say if that actually has happened.
Thank you very much. I have a question here from Agnes. It says, in your view, what differentiates organizations that succeed with AI from those that are only experiments or experimenting, considering that there is an overwhelming number of user cases at play? I think that's what it says. Did you get a question? In your
Yeah,
view,
I
what
think
differentiates
so.
organizations that succeed? Okay, please go ahead.
I think so. That's a very interesting question. I think it has to do with risk appetite for starters of an organization. Um, but I think it also has to do with the intensity of an organization. I'm a firm believer that going to market sooner rather than later is the way to go, because you can always fine tune your product. You can always have version 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 that's better and better and better. But if you're not in market right now, that means you're missing out, right? So a lot of the companies that are able to take that risk, put in that money, and go to market sooner rather than later are able to penetrate themselves and concretize their place in the ecosystem. So I think that is a big differentiator. I mean, look at the examples, right? If you look at Agentforce, Salesforce, when they first showcased it, it was a pretty mediocre solution. And what it's able to do now versus what it was able to do a year and a half ago, um, it's a world apart, right? But they went into market, they started the marketing, they started the sales process, they started getting everybody aware of what they were building. So then it was an easier sell once all of that groundwork was laid. So I think the differentiation is really largely risk appetite and the resources you have to go to market sooner rather than later. That's just my opinion, though.
Thank you very much. We do business in Africa. One of our biggest challenges is around governance and ensuring that people live by the written rules, so to speak. And so that, bearing that in mind, what are the safeguards that can be used to prevent bias and misuse of AI, especially as it concerns the workforce generally in Africa?
I'm not sure I exactly understand the question. Are you talking about safeguards in terms of employment or safeguards in terms of technological biases?
So we could start with safeguards in terms of technological bias, and we can then move it down into employment.
Yeah, so in terms of technological biases, it's a really tough question to answer because it is at the hands of the people who are building these LLMs themselves, right? So where Africa can come in and say, hey, this doesn't work for us, is building their own LLMs, building their own foundational models. I think it's easier said than done. It's one of those statements that's grandiose and sounds great, but it requires a lot of resource and a lot of investment for that to happen. And usually when an investment is being put in place, investors require an ROI, right? So they need to see that, okay, if we build a foundational model that is without the biases of Western training data or whatever that is, what is the business impact and what is the opportunity for an ROI in the African market? That's going to be the question. And regardless of if the investor is, from America, Europe, Africa, or wherever that is, business people want an ROI at the end of the day. So I think that is one of the big determinants of whether or not enough investment is made for localization of these LLMs. I think it is happening. I know China is at the forefront of this in terms of localizing their LLMs. India is trying to create some of their own foundational models. I know there's a couple of organizations in Africa that are trying to do the same, but not much investment or traction has flowed through yet. So it's tough for a government official to understand that they're how do you say this? They're more powerless than they think when it comes to how they can curb the biases of AI, unless they own the construction of it themselves. So, unfortunately, I think that's where the leverage of African leadership lies, at least right now. But that can change significantly going forward, right? And a lot of that has to do with infrastructure. For building more data centers, if we're giving access to more cheap energy, more processing power, that could very well change because in many ways the future is Africa. And in terms of employment, I think governments are taking a bit of a wake-up call. I believe I saw on LinkedIn the other day that the PS of ICT in Kenya is embarking on a training program for 1,000 people getting literacy in AI or something like that. It might even be more than 1,000 people. So they're taking the right steps, right? We need to understand that certain geographies can't move as fast as other geographies, and we have different constraints. So based on those constraints, how do we optimize is the question.
And so based on also around technology and what government can do to support this project or support AI development across Africa, would you subscribe to public-private partnerships for where government can play a role in providing some funding and having companies like yours and other companies that are driving this AI technology across in different industries so that they can have a say to determine what is best for Africa, what is best for Nigeria, what is best for Kenya, so to speak?
100%, and that's been the playbook so far, right? Look at places where this has already been done. I think the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Middle East in general is the perfect example for what happens when a will for government and availability of funds can yield to a budding industry. So Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, these companies can follow suit, right? And I think it is happening, albeit with less intensity. You hear about I'm forgetting on the name, but Microsoft and G4 or G2, the UAE company that is doing $1 billion investment in Kenya, for example, right? That in some sense is a public-private partnership. I think the Kenyan government is also involved in that, but also G2 is a UAE government agency. You're gonna have to fact check me on that, but in some aspects that is a public-private partnership. So I do see that as the optimal way to go, having these kind of investments and the tie-in of the government. But let's see if it gets fructified.
Excellent. And so maybe a little bit around culture once again. And so how do you ensure that AI adoption doesn't compromise fairness, inclusivity, and the human touch in decision making? Basically taking the bare sense of who we are as humans and all of that stuff. How do we ensure that this AI adoption doesn't compromise what makes us human in the workspace?
I think that's again a very tough question to answer because it has to do with human behavior, and that's basically the most ambiguous thing out there, right? But I think one way for us to do is inculcate a culture of independent thinking and leveraging AI rather than relying on AI. So, it's pretty apparent when someone is creating a report or a presentation and most of the work is done by AI. You can hear it, you can see it, it's evident, at least for now. So, folks that are able to put in that effort and really use AI as a tool where they interact with it and ask it questions and probe it. I think that is the way to go in terms of remaining that human element, because AI is going to tell you what you want to hear, and if you don't fight back, I don't want to say fight back, but if you don't rebuttal the responses that you're getting, then you're pretty much just getting a yes man who's going to affirm every single idea you have. And that's not how good ideas are built. Good ideas are built under scrutiny. So it's going to be interesting to see how this develops. I can't say I have a more sure answer to that one.
To it. And so in terms of what AI has come to mean to us, are we at the stage where we begin to recognize people who are leading the conversations around AI developments in the workspace? Do they get extra nods for leading this conversation and driving it within the workspace?
Do you mean in the general industry or within Preparedness itself?
Well, in your industry, in your organization, for instance, would you be giving extra nods to people who are driving this initiative, where especially AI is not directly their function, but they basically are being able to deploy AI to best meet those needs that are important for those objectives that have been set out for them?
Yes, but I would like to say that our recognitions are agnostic of AI. It doesn't have to include AI for a good idea to find value. So AI can only be a tool to expedite processes at the end of the day. So, we give nods regardless of what kind of technology that's being used, right? So a lot of our engineers, for example, a year and a half ago, they were still doing data science courses because they wanted to take that first step in to understand what this industry looks like, right? So data analytics, data cleaning, data formatting, and these are very pivotal things that a lot of folks today have sort of foregone to a great extent. So they started that route at the basics, understanding statistics, understanding visualization, because at the end of the day, if you're using this to make business decisions, you have to be able to leverage that data and explain to someone and make sure your idea resonates with them. right? So a lot of that is a stepping stone towards how someone uses AI. So I would say it's not restricted to AI. We applaud folks for any idea that is worthwhile. Um, AI is but one of the different avenues to achieve that.
Excellent. And so personally, and this is personally for you now, with the advent of AI, have you had to learn and unlearn stuff so that you are better positioned to receive AI? Have you had to go through specific learnings or trainings, all of that, so that you are at the top of your game when it comes to AI?
Yeah, I've had to learn a lot in terms of business implications because the world that I grew up with early on in my career in terms of data science was a very manual machine learning based world. And in many ways, this is merely just an extrapolation of that technology. But what I've had to learn was what this convenience means in a business sense. I've had to learn timing in the market in terms of what do we want to position and what do we want to position with. Had to learn where do we want to invest. All of these things, there's no rule book out there, right? You're just hearing people talk about this and you're trying to make the best decision based on what you're hearing. So these are all the things that I've had to learn. What I've had to unlearn is that's a tougher question to answer. I've had to unlearn that we cannot work within the same constraints that we have been used to because our competition is not doing so, right? So if we think it's going to take X amount of time or Y amount of investment to get somewhere, just know that competition is able to do that much faster and that much more efficiently. So you're not working and thinking in a silo, you're thinking in a very competitive landscape. So your benchmark has to be the benchmark of the most efficient organization out there. It doesn't mean you have to be the most efficient organization out there because that might be out of reach for a lot of people. But that benchmark gives you a good indication of how far away you are from optimization, if you will.
Okay, and so I would imagine that for a lot of organizations in Africa, we have maybe, without being a little bit biased, a number of Generation X employees who are senior leaders. And so how would you begin to encourage somebody who's not really, really into AIs, who's not lived that life of or started working way, way long ago when things were manually based, and now technology has come, and you want to be able to get them to embrace as easy as and quickly as possible. How would you begin to encourage such people?
I think approach it without preconceived notions. Play around with it, right? Treat it like a pet, if you will. I know it sounds silly, but that's really how the first stages of me understanding AI came. I would ask it stupid questions, random questions, just to understand what it is capable of and what it is not capable of, and treat it under duress, treat it under good times. You try to leverage it in as many scenarios as you can before claiming you have a fair enough understanding of what AI is and what you're able to get out of AI, more importantly. So I think that there is no other solution but to implement it and try it yourself. As simple as that. It's not like the barriers to entry are like before, right? You don't have to learn programming or you don't have to learn anything. You don't even need to download anything. You can just open up a web browser, log in with your Gmail and play around with one thing or the other. So the barriers to entry are next to none.
Excellent. Even as we begin to wrap up, I don't know whether there are any questions from the audience. We could take another few questions as we're about to wrap up on all of this. It's been a very, very, very insightful conversation with Rahul around all of this AI initiatives and all what AI is doing, and how we as organizations across Africa would need to embrace this, how government needs to begin to recognize this private sector as true partners, so that there's some serious collaborative efforts across in Africa, so that we don't get drowned by technology and investments that are coming out from the US or from China, that we begin to have across Africa our own models, our own thinking around AI that represents and reflects who we are as Africans. So where do you see the biggest AI-driven opportunities for your organization in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think it is to do with leveraging what we're good at. A company that has a 27-year-old history has obviously built a lot of knowledge base and a lot of IP and a lot of intellectual expertise, not just IP, right? So the question becomes, can we translate that and leverage AI as a technology to further empower our solutions, right? Basically, what we want to be able to do is create next iterations of our existing solutions that are empowered by AI. I don't think we're trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to use the decades of knowledge that we've built in specific place and leverage that as much as possible. So that's where Technobrain's focus is, at least in the next couple of years.
But generally, across Africa, what do you see the future around all of this is headed to for us?
I'm no oracle. I'm not envious of the policymakers of today because this industry is moving at the speed of light. But I think at a foundational level, building the institutions has always been, my sort of go-to answer is you need the universities and you need the polytechnics and you need the one-year schools to explain to you how to use in very practical terms AI, right? So is there a polytechnic school in Nairobi that you can enroll in and learn how to build AI workflows in a 6-month course or a 3-month course? That's what we need, right? Because what AI could do is it could really democratize the kind of services and solutions we offer. So imagine if, a random person sitting in a random place in Nairobi understands that there's a very specific problems that only border drivers or only the vegetable vendors in this one area face. They have the power of the universe now to go and build a solution out there that's very specific for that use case, right? But they're only going to be able to do so if they're actually well-versed with understanding AI, well-versed with the infrastructure of AI, the costs, the business angle of AI, as well as the workflows that has to do with AI. So I think that is what I would sort of recommend.
Okay, thanks a lot. There are a few questions here. As AI tool becomes more common in hiring processes, both on the employer side as well as the applicant, how do you think organizations can ensure they are reducing or managing bias rather than reinforcing it?
This is a funny question because I think this has been happening for the last 10 years. And it has little to do with AI, but simple machine learning and word clouding and things like that. So even as of 10 years ago, if you applied for a job, if your resume did not have those filters in terms of specific keywords and specific skill sets, they would not look at your resume the second time. So I think the same is going to keep happening. So the way you can differentiate yourself is things that AI can't do, right? Your GitHub repository can have stellar projects. Your resume can look different. You can try to differentiate yourself based on aesthetics. There's many things you can do to differentiate yourself. A lot of people are using AI to then tackle the AI ingesters that ingest resumes. So it's a bit of a game right now. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out because the applier is using AI, the screener is using AI. So it almost kind of contradicts itself. We'll see how this matures.
Thank you very much. There's a question here, and it says, how is Technobrain positioning itself as a regional and global AI leader while responsibly addressing the risks of job displacement and livelihood disruptions, and ensuring that this AI strategy strengthens rather than undermines the very pillars that make Technobrain a great place to work. That's an interesting one.
Yeah,
Should I repeat that?
that is a
Yeah,
great question. I think we absolutely are. I, I don't want to say that we're trying to be the forefront of AI in East Africa. Uh, this is the question. But we're definitely trying to be responsible in how we implement AI. Um, but I will say that while a company can do as much, and I'm talking about Technobrain, but I'm also talking generally here, a company will try to do as much as it can to retain its workforce. You have to think of this in a very business-minded way, right? So if a company like Meta is laying off 3,000 people in a day without thinking twice, that trickles down, right? So if Meta lays off 3,000 people, that means their vendors are affected, their subsequent supply chains are affected, and that trickles down to every other part of the supply chain requiring those same efficiencies and cost cuttings. So Technobrain is going to be focused on exactly what I mentioned earlier. There's going to be 2 or 3 critical things that we as Technobrain have built IP and intellectual capacity over the past 20 years, and that is where we're going to focus on. And that is not going to have major implications in jobs. But that is not to say that an AI coder from ChatGPT 5 years down the line is not going to replace somebody, right? So how does somebody prepare for that? How does anybody prepare for that? Is use it and understand thoroughly how the infrastructure works, where it has its pitfalls, and build a good repository of you using AI to build things. That will make you indispensable. Because if you think about it at the end of the day, I don't have a specific number, but there's very few people who actually know how AI infrastructure works, how it can be implemented in the enterprise level, how it can be implemented at a product level, right? So if you're part of this cohort, you're going to be one of the few people determining how this industry progresses in the coming years.
Thank you very
But
much.
it's difficult to say the impact on jobs right now, right? So if you look at that jobs report that Microsoft created, I think that'll give you a good indication of how vulnerable your position is. And believe me, there's a lot of management and leadership positions in there too. So no one is impervious to this. And even if you look at examples who have been laid off, it's actually been generalist managerial positions. They want pure play engineers right now. So generalist positions that an AI can do, they're the ones that are being replaced in these big tech companies.
I get your point here. And so we unfortunately cannot take so many of these questions. I think with Raul's permission, maybe we are able to share the questions with you outside of this session, and we'll be happy to get your feedback around what your responses look like to these questions. But I guess we can take this final one that says, how can we foster a culture that encourages experimentation and accepts calculated failure? All AI projects often require iterative testing and learning. So how can we encourage a culture that encourages experimentation and accepts calculated failure, knowing that AI basically requires a lot of iteration?
That's a good question again. I think this has to be driven down from leadership and leadership at every single level, right? So if you're a project manager and your engineer wants to play around with AI, like you as the project manager has to have that wherewithal to empower your engineer to try, right? But try within constraints, because under no circumstances can you expose a client or build in risks to somebody else than yourself, unfortunately, at the end of the day. So as long as it's not impacting client or revenues, I think risk is good. We need to encourage experimentation. And that is exactly what we're doing. A lot of the things we're trying to do, in fact, most of the things we're trying to do will probably not reach fruition. But what are we doing in that journey, right? We're getting everybody trained. We're getting everybody well acquainted with how to build with AI, how to build in general, how to create products, how to understand the whole business cycle of a product and the viability of it financially. I think these are extremely important skills. So as our engineers learn that, I think they'll also understand that risks and uncertainty is okay. They are encouraged to experiment, um, albeit within constraints. I don't think you're going to have unconstrained experimentation. That just never works.
Thank you very much. We've gone past the hour, and I think it's a good time to wrap up. We want to thank Rahul for his insightful comments, ideas around how companies should best prepare themselves and be ready for the advent of AI. We want to thank you for being part of this great conversation. Today, we see obviously that AI is not just about algorithms, it's about leadership, it's about culture, it's about trust and future of our workplaces, it's about being prepared. You heard Rahul talk about the fact that people who are the ones who have lost jobs are mostly those who are generalists. So there's a need for us to begin to become more deliberate around being able to develop skills that can help us cohabit with AI in this workspace. In the advent of AI, it means that there has to be technological readiness for what we need to do. Culture needs to be strong and remain very vibrant. We, at Great Place to Work, we believe that AI should amplify human greatness, not replace it. And so we want to encourage leaders out there, senior leaders, those who are also too aspiring to be so, founders of organizations, to begin to bring the conversation closer to your workspace and how it impacts on culture, knowing very well that culture plays a very key role in us being able to arrive at our objectives and goals as individuals, as organizations across Africa. Rahul, thank you once again for this wonderful session that we had. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll try and share some of these questions with Rahul. Hopefully Rahul is able to take out time to be able to respond.
Absolutely.
We can share those responses also with those who have answered asked questions. Thank you very much for making this a very, very great event. Until next
Thank you for having me on.
sometime next month, where we'll bring in somebody also who's a great leader. See you then. Like we always say at Great Place to Work, we are building a community of great workplaces. And we say, imagine if 50% of companies in Kenya are great workplaces. What it will do to the economy of Kenya, what it will do to the employees who work in great workplaces, how it will impact their families. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.